and welcome to another episode of Superheroes of Arabia podcast. Today is something really special for me because I am joined by one of my favorite writers whose work I came across in the late 90s and early 2000s. And up until a few months ago, was reviewing one of his works as part of Jeddah Comic Book Talk. And lo and behold, one fine day, I open up my Instagram and I see his kind words of appreciation on my IGTV video. And that was like, I just failed to describe the feeling, but I was blown away totally. I'm still like, can't believe, I can't process that this really has happened. And even more so that he was kind enough to accept my invite to be my guest on Superheroes of Arabia podcast. The guest I'm talking about is Jim Krueger. For those of you who were reading comics in the late 90s and early 2000s, he and Alex Ross came out with an impact, a huge impact, or I would call it a dystopian impact with Earth X, which was later followed on by two other parts, but then came different volumes. Mr. Jim Krueger, before I proceed with the interview, I would like you to say hi to the community.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here.
The pleasure is all ours, sir. Mr. Krueger, thank you very much, not only from my side, but also from each and every comic book reader in Saudi Arabia who has read your works and who is a huge fan of yours. It means a lot that you found the time today to talk to us.
Well, that's very kind. And you know, I'm so grateful that you're telling and taking comic books all over the world too. And I'm grateful you're including some of mine in that.
Again, it's the pleasure is all ours. Why? Because your works has given us a beautiful trip of in the world of escapism, something to look into, the kind of imagination that we came across, the kind of storytelling that we came across. It was totally mind-blowing because many of us have been readers of comics since the 70s and the 80s. And now the new generation is coming about. They are seeing the work that is there on the cinematic universe, and it's making them even more curious to read the works, the original work that was done, that has transpired it all.
So, yeah, no, I mean, Alex and I are really lucky that we're seeing, in fact, it's almost like, even though I wrote Earth X, you know, over 20 years ago, to see its stories now showing up in so many Marvel movies and so many of the comics, it's like all of a sudden people are coming up to me at conventions or messaging me on Facebook or Instagram saying things like, you realize that you influenced years and years of Marvel comics and Marvel movies. And no, that's doubt. Really an honor to be part of like that bigger story.
I couldn't agree more with the feedback that you have received. To me, it seems like your work is receiving or is experiencing the reawakening which a sitcom, Office, recently experienced during COVID time.
I love The Office. That's high praise again.
Michael Scott all the way.
Michael Scott all the way. He's my favorite by far.
All of the fans of Office in Saudi Arabia are going to love you even more for this.
I love that show I still watch that show on a regular basis.
Awesome. Mr. Krueger, what happens is that for people like us who are into more reading than the cinematic side of things, today a lot of information is available to us on the internet. We can go to Wikipedia, we can go to fandom, we can check out the creator's website if they have one, or their social accounts. But I want to hear straight from you that what got you into the world of superheroes, irrespective Marvel, DC, or otherwise?
Right. Well, it really started. There are probably three pieces of my own secret origin that play into this, if not more.
Okay.
My dad was an auto mechanic. He had a garage and a number of guys working for him. So when I was very young, um, he would drive his tow truck home, pick me up, and take me on tow jobs with him. I was only 5 or 6 years old,
Okay.
and it wasn't like I could do much help or be much of a help to him, but I would hold his dirty rag, or I would hold a light if he was hooking up a car. And to
Right.
reward me, to pay me for helping him on these jobs, he would buy me comic books. I would climb up into his truck, and there'd always be a comic book or two that he got for me that would be waiting there. And this would be mid 70s. So it was all Jack Kirby at that point. It was all Machine Man and Commandy and, Mr. Miracle and all that kind of thing. And so that was that. I've also since found out that before I was even born, before my mom even met my dad, that my mom drew a number of romance comics
For
of
Marvel?
her own. No, no, of her own. And she's
Wow.
got these things on sheets of paper, and and other things that she had an office job with, and she would get these big calendars that had space under, and she would draw what she wore every day in on that day. And so I have maybe 10 pages of sequential romance comics and fashion comics artwork from my mom from that period. So in so many ways, both my mom and my dad were preparing me for this comic industry. And I've told this next story a number of times, but I think this was really my call to be a storyteller,
Right.
because my dad worked so much. And my mom really wanted us to have some really big family vacation experiences. We took a trip to Disney World
Okay.
when I was very young, and with myself and my brother, and we took a train from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Chicago,
Mhm.
where I got my first comic book, by the way, and it was a Superman comic. My brother got a Batman comic, and I was kind of jealous of him, but eventually I became Team Superman. But
Okay.
when you're a kid, it's like, oh, Batman. Well, anyhow, we're on this train on our way to Florida, and it's a fairly long trip, and Florida gets hit by a hurricane.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, is the trip ruined? Is it what's going to happen? My dad told me, well, weather changes really quickly in Florida. Just because it's bad now, maybe it'll change by the time we get there. We'll see. And my mom said, well, it's Disney World. Maybe there are things we can do inside there, all these things. But there we are in our, those yellow and those orange ponchos entering the park. And there's a tunnel that you kind of go under where there are lockers available.
Right.
And so you enter, and the train goes on top of it. So you enter, and there's this, like, it's not big, but there's this kind of tunnel, and then you come out on Main Street, and there's a castle, and there's all that kind of thing. But in the time of entering that tunnel and coming out on the other side, which couldn't have been more than a minute or two, the hurricane really broke. And so I entered, and there was this terrible storm and this tunnel, and I came out on the other side, and you had beams of sunlight shooting down from the clouds and
Okay.
ricocheting and cascading off the puddles that were already starting to dry because Florida weather is so hot.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. And my dad looked down at me and he said, now you know why they call it the Magic Kingdom.
That's a good one.
And I swear, he screwed me up from that point on. From that point on, it was like stories are always about tunnels. They're always about going through storms and coming out in some sort of new reality that's better than you could have ever hoped.
This is an amazing start to to the long journey where you would be ending up writing for superheroes, and one of the works would involve your favorite character, Superman, which would be Justice.
Right, right.
Okay, but I think I felt when I was going through your profile that you came from a very planned middle class background. Planned in the
Oh,
sense, like for example, you get your degree, then you get a job in the corporate world, then you climb up the ladder. The reason I'm asking about it is that you ended up being the copywriter and then the creative director at Marvel, rather
yeah,
than being part of the bullpen.
right,
And
right.
before
Well,
that, you were in an ad agency. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I no, that's very true. I was at a number of ad agencies. I mean, look, the truth is that I never dreamed that I would be getting to write comic books. I never dreamed that I would get to be in now living in LA, or that I got to live in Times Square, New York. Of course, I never dreamed that I would be held at gunpoint by people who thought I was somebody else either. I never dreamed some of the other stuff that's happened in my life.
Yeah.
But the point is that opportunities came along the way. And I think I was fortunate enough to have failed enough when I was young.
Failed enough when you were young.
Yeah, that because those first, I had 3 or 4 advertising jobs, and while I had success in the copywriting world, like I won awards and that kind of thing, none of the jobs lasted long. You know, part of that was economy, but I just got laid off over and over again at like 2 or 3 different agencies. And then finally, I did a campaign, an advertising campaign about me, and started sending that to Marvel with my advertising portfolio and that kind of thing. And thanks to people I met who were very kind and very giving, who let me even crash with them, you know, stay with them for a night or two when I went to New York on an impromptu, because they were like, well, maybe we'll have an opening up. And I was like, well, how about if I just come to New York? Will you meet with me and we can talk and you can see if I'm the kind of person you would want in your company? Right. Like it was like that. So I kind of pushed very politely always, but I kind of pushed. And ultimately people were really kind, and I got in as a copywriter and was able just to kind of work my way up. And even while working at Marvel, you know, I made some mistakes. You know, I upset some people that I wished I hadn't. I had a book come out from Dark Horse called The Foot Soldiers, which was my first real step in becoming a creator. And Marvel, not everyone in the Marvel Bullpen was so happy about that. But I was in advertising, and because I was in advertising and not part of Marvel Editorial, I was ultimately allowed to do so. But you know, you struggle and you build relationships and you work things. And so I was able to get to this point while Marvel was going through its bankruptcy in the later 90s.
Right.
It ultimately led to me promoting Alex and his work on Marvels, and us kind of becoming friends in the midst of it. I remember Alex sharing with me his early notes on Kingdom Come and what he wanted to do with that as a story. And that was before Mark Waid got involved in it. And, you know, we had a mutual love for Alan Moore and a mutual love for Machine Man, and, you know, all these things where we were very like-minded in the kind of stories we appreciated and the kind of concepts that we gravitated towards. So when Earth X first showed itself, it wasn't even a real project. It was like a promo piece, like just a fun editorial piece for Wizard Magazine.
Right. Yes.
So,
okay. It's quite interesting that you mentioned that you experienced quite a lot of failures early in the early part of your career, and then later on you started to use your own set of skills and competencies for your own self, and then the door started opening.
Yeah.
For me, this part is a bit important because a lot of us, especially from my generation, because I represent the last of Generation X, we have had similar situations. The main thing that I want to ask you is, if you remember the age when you realized that, okay, I'm losing like jobs one after the other, even though I'm giving like 200%, it's time for me to stand up for myself.
You know, I don't remember exactly the age, but it was probably right before I left to join Marvel, which would have been like mid 90s.
Right.
It was after the gunpoint incident in which a number of things culminated for me. It was like I had a sense of what life was supposed to be, kind of an expectation of what our lives were meant to be, or you know, you get a job, you know, you get married, you have kids, blah blah blah, that's it. And that time when I was held at gunpoint, it was the culmination of so many things, from even being in in a bad marriage and danger coming to my door in the form of guys with guns and who thought I was a guy named Bill. And when ultimately I was able to get away from that situation and knock on another guy's door so I could call the police from his door,
Yeah.
that guy's name was Bill.
So they actually came for your neighbor.
Right. Well, it certainly seems like it. And it felt like there's so much more to a person's life than the expectations that sometimes our families or our world puts on us.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And I say that fortunately. I say, you know, sometimes we're stuck in the expectations that are on us, and we're stuck in smaller lives because of that. But in this case, because there was danger, because there was disappointment, because of all this stuff, it was a sense of I was just like, not only is there more for me out there, but in a lot of cases, there's irony to life. There's a narration to life. And that's the point where I started paying attention to my own story and the stories that are being told through other people's lives too.
That's very inspiring, and I think this is like well, this is really important for people to realize, because it's so relatable on so many levels. Okay, now
This is ice green tea, by the way. It's not beer. This isn't that kind of interview.
no, even if it is beer, this is I'm like Joe Rogan.
I like it.
So okay, uh, so now we are seeing Jim Krueger, the copywriter slash creative director, who realizes what life is about after that unfortunate incident at home, the gunpoint incident. And then one thing leads to another. He ends up in the bullpen. We are talking about a time where this is before Joe Quesada becomes the editor in chief.
Right.
It's Bob Harris, the age of Harris.
Yes.
What was Marvel Bullpen like at that time when you and Alex were working on EarthX?
Well, what's really interesting is that the bullpen is I was there really through the end of the bullpen. Like Marvel was on Park Avenue. It was 387 Park Avenue, I think, and they would move a couple years later, but they had this giant bullpen area where people would do art correction. Sometimes there'd be lettering, paste up being done. There would be design. There would be, you know, Flo Steinberg, Stanley's like gal Friday was still there, was still, you know, doing stuff. And she was so sweet. And
No doubt.
I think I have a copy of that issue of What If, number 11, that she signed, Flo Steinberg. Like, I love it so much. I'm so excited that I still have it in my collection.
Which one are you talking about? The What If
The one where
Fantastic Four?
Yeah, the one where the original Marvel Bullpen becomes the Fantastic Four. So
one of my favorite covers.
Anyhow, I could go up there and people would be talking and editors would be there, artists would be there. It was really, really cool. And the other thing is John Romita Sr. was there.
He was still working there.
Yeah, he was still doing all that stuff. So, I mean, it's not like Alex would be in the offices. He would visit every once in a while, but I was there day in, day out. And this project happened. And Marvel was going through president after president after president. Like, Marvel had more presidents than copywriter jobs I lost. You know, I lost 3 copywriters. I think we must have gone through 5 or 6 presidents in those 2 or 3 years. Like,
it was a messy situation.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that helped EarthX.
How would that do?
It helped EarthX because Marvel was going through bankruptcy. And when EarthX number 0 came out, everyone was like, oh, Jim Krueger, he's written a couple things, but he's an untested writer. There's no way this is going to be popular. Alex Ross isn't painting it. They've got this John Paul Leon who's really sketchy and really shadowy. People aren't going to like that and all that kind of thing. And so everyone thought it was going to fail dramatically. And when 0 came in and it had like well over 100,000 copies that were ordered, they were like, okay, well, let's just wait for issue 1 to come out and that'll go down. But then EarthX stayed above 100,000 the entire run of the book.
Amazing.
And Marvel couldn't believe it. And it was like Marvel's, I want to say it was like one of their, in the top 3 of their best-selling books. Every single month it came out. And so Bob Harris, who was never an editor to mess with something that was working, he just kind of ignored it and didn't pay any attention, even though, the original outline I wrote for Earth X never explained the big revelations that were to come. And
Don't get
so
me.
I was,
Yeah.
I was like being like, okay, can we get away with this? Can we get away with explaining the Marvel universe and tying together all the MacGuffins of years and tying together all the mythologies and letting it stand as like an origin for the Marvel universe, knowing that Marvel Editorial would never fully embrace it because all the secrets are out. But we did it anyhow, hoping it would get through, and it got through.
And that's thanks to thank you, Bob Harris, for ignoring it. Otherwise,
yes. Thank you, Bob Harris, for not looking too close.
Because I still haven't forgiven Bob Harris for what he did with 1991 X-Men. So
wait. What about 1991 X-Men?
Well, this controversy I came across because for almost 2 decades, I was trying to figure out why would Chris Claremont all of a sudden leave Marvel.
Yeah. No, I get it. I wish we could have had 2 more years of Chris Claremont, and I've read his plots. I've read what he was planning on doing, and the death of Wolverine and him being brought back as an assassin of the Hand and all that. That would have been so awesome to see.
And what's even more painful is, I'm sure you're reading X-Men Forever comics, which are being written by Chris Claremont. That deadly combination of Chris Claremont alongside Jim Lee. Now, the art that's being done by various artists is very good in that book. I'm not going to say that it's not that good, but it's like, it's that thing that still remains within my heart that I wish, or we deserve to have more of it. Chris Claremont and Jim Lee and X-Men.
And what's so interesting is I never agreed with a lot of Bob's decisions, right, but he's a great writer. I love his run of Avengers with Steve Epting. I thought that was a great run of Avengers with Steve Epting. And I was the guy who brought all the Alan Moore, Alan Davis, Captain Britain stuff to Bob and said, this needs to be out there. In fact, one of the things I did at Marvel that I'm really proud of is I brought all the British creators and all the UK creators to the attention of Marvel Editorial. But from Grant Morrison to Carlos Pacheco to like Alan Davis to Pasquale Ferry to blah, blah. I brought all these guys to Marvel being like, you guys need to look at this guy, hire this guy. Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale's first work at Marvel was a Nightcrawler backup story in Excalibur 75. That was also my first story at Marvel.
Yes, I remember that one.
So I feel really proud of that, and I feel really proud of that. I feel like, oh, that was really good. I feel like I learned how to write comics by reading British comics more than American comics, because that's the sensibility I really liked. 2000 AD.
2000 AD, okay, yeah. Right. One heck of a comic. But I want this point I found a bit interesting. Not a bit interesting, I would say a lot interesting. Alan Moore was no stranger to Marvel because he was writing for Marvel's UK imprint back in the 80s with Marvel Man, and before he went to DC, he was with Marvel in a way.
Right, because he was doing the Captain Britain series. He was doing Miracle Man, Marvel Man for Warrior Magazine. He was doing V for Vendetta for Warrior Magazine. He was doing some of the backup stuff in Doctor Who magazine that was also published by Marvel at the time on the British side. And he even did some of the Star Wars weekly stuff for Marvel at that time. But the thing is I feel like at that time, Marvel Editorial, like, this was the other thing that it was awesome about being at Marvel. It was just awesome, and I'm so grateful. But there was a but to it. Is every week we would get stacks and stacks of pretty much everything that was published. So every week I would get I would get a stack that was over 100 comics high of not only Marvel and DC, but other companies.
Wow.
And so, and I was always trying to find other talent and stuff like that beyond Marvel and DC proper. So it was impossible for editors to notice what was going on with other comics at the time. Like they were like, and the editors were so overworked. I mean, each editor was like editing like 5, 6, 7 titles a month plus special projects. So they weren't able to pay attention to something that was going on
Across
with
the Atlantic.
Marvel UK, or with this thing or this thing or this thing. And so what I would do is I would curate stuff for them. Like I did Xeroxes of all the Alan Moore, Alan Davis, Captain Britain stuff, make a Xerox book and bring it to Bob. I would bring, pages, and I would sit down with an editor and say, look at Carlos Pacheco, look at what he did in Dark Guard. Look at how beautiful this is. Imagine if he was doing this. That led to Warren Ellis, and all those people coming in.
So here I'd like to just bring the attention of all the viewers that this was the atmosphere at Marvel, a Marvel that is going through bankruptcy, overworked editors, writers, and artists, to the extent that British writers or European creators had a better luck with DC Comics since the 80s. But at Marvel, they were a bit at the back foot until Jim Krueger brought them to the attention of Bob Harris, and then things moved on from that side, and Marvel experienced a whole new change when it comes to its international mix of creators.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if there are now all kinds of American creators that are upset with me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want everyone to have jobs.
I'm sure American creators are not upset with you, Mr. Krueger, because the kind of chemistry that we are seeing in whether it's Marvel or DC, or I start comparing stuff back when I picked up my first comic book, which my dad bought me in 1984. And
you remember what it was?
It was Marvel Tales Presents The Amazing Spider-Man, which was a reprint of the issue where Spider-Man comes across Scorpion for the first time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I read all the Marvel Tales stuff too. I loved Marvel Tales and the ones that reprinted Fantastic Four and Captain America. The reprint books were some of my favorites.
Yeah, and the other book that still remains part of my memory, which unfortunately my younger brother made a serial out of it by ripping it off to shreds, was the Captain America Incredible Hulk issue. I forgot the number, but on the cover you have the Hulk like trying to rip open Captain America's costume apart, and Captain America is like, going back like this.
Wow, because I'm trying to remember what that issue, which issue that was. When you first started talking about it, I was like, oh wait, that's number 230, and we see Cap and he's like hiding behind his shield, and we see the Hulk's fist coming upon. But it might be the other half of that story in Captain America.
This issue, the one that you're mentioning, that wasn't it.
Okay.
There is another one, and the cover. This is the cover basically, that like Cap is trying to run away from the Hulk, and the Hulk has grabbed onto his jersey or his costume, and it's like the Cap is trying to run away, and the Hulk is making sure he doesn't escape. I'll try to look for the issue.
I'm trying to look it up right now. So that's the cover I was thinking of when you were first describing the story, but now I'm going to find the other. Sorry, I get so excited about.
I found it. It's Captain America number 257.
Oh, 257. Oh, yeah. I see it. This one right here.
Yes. Gamma Droid.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. And that was right after the amazing Roger Stern, John Byrne, Joseph Rubinstein run
on Captain America. Yes.
So good.
So what happened was initially, like when I got the comics, I used to just browse through the pages because the art was so fascinating. Then I started to read slowly all the bubbles that were there, the dialogue boxes and everything. And now this is like 1980s Saudi Arabia. You only have two TV channels. One is in Arabic, the other one is in English. And the English channel doesn't have a lot of Marvel DC coming in. We were fortunate enough to watch the 1981 Spider-Man series and Fantastic Four 60s animated series and Lou Ferrigno Hulk series.
Yeah, very cool.
But the comics were a rarity, if you will. So now what happens is that when you're bored, you take out your comic, you open it up, and you start reading the stuff that you didn't read before. So like things like Stan Lee Presents, writer, artist, inker. And then I started to go into the bullpen bulletin section, Stan's so
Right.
So the names that you would come across back in the day, and this was pretty much true up until the 90s, that you would mostly find North American names with very few outsiders like or foreign names like Barry Windsor Smith, for example, or Eric Larson. But after the 90s, now we know what changed thanks to you.
Yeah. Well, that's very kind. I'm only one person that was helping expand so that artists and writers from around the world could work at Marvel and DC. I'm only one of those people who did that.
Well, we want to thank you and each and every one who was like you in ensuring that this would be possible. You mentioned the late John Paul Leon. I wanted to ask something about justice, but I'll but talk about it afterwards. Do you think is he the best artist in Marvel and DC's history to illustrate dystopia?
I'm so glad you put it in the terms of dystopia. He drew shadows like what I really love about how John Paul drew, and I know I've talked to Alex about this many times, is a lot of times, and there are famous directors, film directors that did the same thing. So it's in my mindset of what I like is in so many ways he drew the shadow that a figure cast as much as he drew the character itself.
Yes.
And that's why all his stuff looks so unbelievable and miraculous in black and white, just like in color. I mean, Marvel did that, or graffiti. Graffiti did those collections of Earth X that are just in pure black and white, and they're miraculous. They're miraculous to see.
I can see your point of view because I think I struggled to define dystopia. I read 1984, but it was quite hard for me to imagine the world of 1984, the Orwellian world, if you will. But the moment I saw John Paul's illustration, I was like, this guy, where was he all this time? And it's really sad that he left us really, really soon. Yeah. I mean, he died like a year before or 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Now, one question is that.
You know what? I think one of the keys to how dystopia is represented artistically is that if it's a beautiful looking future, it's not dystopia.
Yes.
So to show dystopia, you have to show the past corrupted. You have to show the past broken down, or the present without the advantage of advancement. So that's what John Paul did so great. That's what, when you look at, even things like Road Warrior, Mad Max, it's you're seeing the present as if something got in the way of its advancement. And that's dystopia, or the way it needs to be represented, I think. But I'm just making that up right now. So.
Okay. And right. But I have one slight complaint from you.
Okay. Bring it on.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Alex has a complaint about that for me too.
Okay. Let's start. Let's start with Alex's complaint, and then I'll share mine.
Okay. So, and I recently read that first issue, and I had so much fun with it. Alex's complaint was that he was that Spider-Man was too jokey. He was like, "You're making me hate Spider-Man," and I was like, "Look, there's so many characters. Every panel Spider-Man's in, I've just made it a challenge to myself to have him say something that's snarky or a joke of some sort." And I had so much fun doing it. So much fun. And there was this whole, you know how later in the series they all go to the past?
Yes.
So, and I wasn't allowed to do this because Alex didn't like it, but I was going to build in this thing where Spider-Man's in the past. He's masquerading as this character named the Challenger, who has a star on his nose, like
Yeah.
a star, which is ridiculous. And I was going to have all the other heroes say to Spider-Man and remind Spider-Man that they had all heard of the Challenger before, even though he hadn't. And they were all going to say over and over again, "Look, the Challenger is a very serious character. No jokes," because they're all sick of his jokes. I thought it would be so funny to have a humorless Spider-Man going through his own version of humorous kind of constipation because he can't make jokes the entire time, so that when he comes out on the other end, so to speak, sorry for the constipation joke or metaphor, but when he came out on the other side, he'd just be nonstop jokes until no one was around him anymore. I had this whole joke thing, just whole little thing. So that was the thing Alex didn't like. He was like, "Jim, where's Spider-Man's pathos? Where's his care? Where's his everything?" Like, and I still got some jokes in. You know, like when Doctor Strange says, "By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth," he asked if that's spelled with a W or an H. You know, I was like, I had fun.
If I ever get a chance to interview Alex,
Oh no, don't do that. Don't even bring it up. It's a sore subject. we don't talk about my writing of Spider-Man and Avengers Invaders anymore.
Okay. Surprisingly, I was pretty much okay with that. Even though when I'm watching like Marvel Cinematic Universe, one of the things I really hate about the Marvel Cinematic Universe are the forced puns. But here, the reason was that seeing Spider-Man going through the depression that followed after the death of Captain America post Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, some people indulge in this therapy that they are in this denial mode, that they keep on trying to pretend that they are having a really great time, and they are constantly making jokes even when they are being faced in adversity, because this is a human condition which is seen amongst many people. So that part wasn't troubling for me. The troubling part for me was that when I saw the name Ross Krueger
Right.
Sandowski,
Right.
Sadowski, sorry.
Right.
And initially, I thought this guy was related. He was related to Sasquatch.
Oh, ha! Yeah.
No, but on a serious note, why wasn't John Paul Leon part of this? Because
Oh, well, first of all,
yeah,
we love John Paul.
yeah,
I love John Paul. You know, I mean, before his very sad death, I would have had John Paul draw every single thing I ever did.
right.
But it wasn't something that John Paul could even do.
Okay.
In so many ways, I feel, and this is a sad thing, I feel like Earth X kind of was it for John Paul. Like after Earth X, it was rare that we got a lot more John Paul art. It really was. There was Winterman, which was beautiful, but it came out very slow. There was that Batman project that he did with Kurt Busiek that was
Yes.
really slow. But and there was some issues of Challengers of the Unknown that came out, and a one shot of the Grant Morrison X-Men here, a one shot there. But as far as another giant project, we never saw another giant project from John again. And like we really wanted John to do more Universe X and Paradise X, and like if he didn't want to do the main series, we would have put him on the specials or whatever like that. And I think we just kind of fried him.
The reason I asked this was when the Avengers.
And the other problem on Avengers Invaders, and there was a real problem, it was just people's schedules and stuff like that. I mean, there must have been 4 or 5 or 6 different artists who were stepping in for this part of it and this part of it and this part of it. And a lot of times the artwork in Avengers Invaders, it's uneven.
Yeah. And
So
the reason I remember John Paul a lot was when we saw the modern day Avengers traveling back in time to the World War II Germany.
right. Oh yeah, that would have been so amazing.
So okay, right now, if anyone reads Earth X, if or anyone goes through the Earth X trilogy, and then they read Avengers, Invaders series, and then your recent project with Vel B and Alex Ross, Marvel's X,
Which is again a prequel to Earth X.
Earth X. Now, all of these are, well, two of them are hardcore dystopia. One of them is like about time travel and everything, but it has a very dystopian touch to it in certain aspects.
Right.
And then we see that one fine day, Alex Ross and Jim Krueger are doing Justice, a very colorful, a true story about escapism, inspired by Super Friends.
Yep.
How did you guys transition from here to there?
Well, it wasn't like, it's not like we just like dystopian stories or we just like end of the world stories. And there's certainly some of that in Justice, but it was more like, Alex especially has been influenced by things like that first Superman movie, the cartoons of our youth, all that sort of things. So after all the Earth X stuff, DC was like, well, what do you want to do here? And so we started, putting this together, and DC had very different ideas of what they wanted, especially because Dan Didio and Bob Harris, both those guys were in charge at the time. They wanted more of a Justice League Year One thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, Mark Waid had done such a great job on his own Justice League Year One. We didn't really want to touch on that. And what, Alex really wanted to do Super Friends. He really wanted to do Justice League versus the Legion of Doom. And he had some thoughts on it. And he was like, so Jim, what do you think? What should we do? And so the whole story began to kind of come out of that.
For me, it's quite impressive because from a storytelling point of view, just for my viewers' knowledge, this is the beauty that I am talking about. It's a three-part.
Alex's work is so amazing. It's so miraculous in that thing.
No doubt, no doubt. But when I saw your name on Justice, I was like, because I'm not into writing stories. I have maybe this belief that if a person is used to writing dystopia, they are more comfortable with that. They find their comfort zone within that. Because if I take into consideration literature, if you read George Orwell, you're not going to be expecting George Orwell to be giving you something that's about escapism. He would be putting the reality right in your face in an indirect way. So I've personally found that, if you are writing end of the world and dystopia, and then all of a sudden you write a story that is centered around one of the most beloved animated series in the 70s and the early 80s, and it's just pure escapism that makes you feel good. It's not comedic, it's adventure. That's quite impressive for me.
Well, thanks. And, while I did this in Earth X, every time I write a character, and this totally applies to Justice too, every time I write a character, I want to remind people, I don't want to just take the story further, but I want to remind people why they love that character in the first place. Right. And so, because each issue is written by the perspective of a different character, including Lex Luthor in issue 1, which like Dan DiDio was totally against. He made me rewrite issue 1, like I want to say 6-7 times. Wow. Until finally being like, and then Alex, to his credit, had other artists, other people like Paul Dini and stuff like that read it, and they all said, Dan, what's going on? This is a great first issue. But Dan was like, Lex Luthor's a bad guy, and he knows he's a bad guy, and he wakes up in the morning and thinks of bad things to do. And I was like, no, Lex Luthor thinks he's right. So let's give him the best argument possible for why he's against superheroes and
Amazing.
why he's. And so ultimately, Dan was like, okay, we'll do that. We'll do what you guys want. We'll do Super Friends. We won't do the origin. Blah 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 blah. Okay. So
Okay.
but like when I got to write all the other characters after that, like Batman was issue 2 and Martian Manhunter was issue 3, and I think I loved writing Shazam more than anyone, just because I had never seen anyone write the character as if at this point he's drawing on the wisdom of Solomon. At this point, he's drawing on the speed of Mercury, and stuff like that. I was like, wow, no one's ever written him that way. I'm going to use that while also writing the youth of Billy Batson,
Right.
because it's anchored to the childlike want for power and childlike wisdom and childlike hope and all that kind of thing. Like, it was just fun, but I really wanted to approach every one of these characters, reminding people why they love these characters, why these characters are important, and why this whole book should be a celebration of the DC mythos.
Amazing. Amazing. Uh,
And then I also had Alex reading my scripts, and Alex's love for the DC characters, and like that whole battle, like in issue 10,
yeah.
where this happens this way and this happens this way. Like, I pushed for the armor because I was really excited about the armor. I thought, ooh, that'll keep all the nanobites out and blah 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 blah. But then as far as the battle went, practically all of that was choreographed by Alex. Like, he had a very specific set of this causes this, this causes this, this causes this. And my initial draft of that script was explaining everything because it happened so fast. And I was like, oh, that didn't fit with the rest of the series. So I was like, the more you really look at that choreography, the more you're going to see like, oh, this is all like these dominoes, one knocking down the other, which knocks down another and stuff like that. It's really quite fun.
Well, this is something really wonderful to hear, because it's more exciting to know that the creators who gave us something wonderful to read, wonderful to explore, had themselves a lot of fun in creating it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, your last project that I read was Marvel's X, and for myself as well as my viewers, we want to know that what are your current projects, whether they are Marvel, DC, anime, or otherwise.
Right. Well, I should mention right now, because we are talking, that myself and Dean Batali, who's probably best known for being a writer on that 70s show,
Yes.
and was even on a season or two of Buffy, the Vampire Slayer back in the day, we recently wrote the Americanized version of this anime movie called The Journey, which is the first Japanese Saudi anime in history.
Everyone, you are looking at Jim Krueger, who has this badge of achievement. He is not only involved with what is coming about or what is being developed within the North American market, he is closer to our home. He has been involved with The Journey, the joint Saudi-Japanese feature, and on this podcast, you heard it straight from him.
Yeah, no, it was really an honor. It was really an honor. It was lots of fun. There were some jokes I wanted to make that I wasn't allowed to make, but it was really, really interesting to work on, and work with such good people on it. So there's that. Alex and I keep on talking about more things we want to do, more things we're thinking of, and lots of different characters all over the place. And I can't talk about those things. I'm getting to write my first experiences of prose, like short stories. So there was just a book that came out called Caped Fear, like CAPED Fear, and it mixes horror with superheroes. And they're amazing. They're amazing writers. Like Jonathan Mayberry's in there. Robert Bloch is in there. Neil Gaiman is in there, and the fact that I get a story in there.
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. And by the way, my story is not a Superman story. I'm just setting the record straight. It is not a Superman story. Okay. Anyhow, I'm getting to do that, and I just wrote a Dracula thing for their next collection, and I think I have a Nosferatu one deal do after that. And I'm trying to get them to do zombie stuff. So bit by bit, while in no way am I giving up comics because it's my first love and it relates back to my childhood and my parents and Disney World and all that kind of thing. I'm getting to write some prose, and I'm excited about that. I imagine one day being some old guy sipping my wine at some sort of outdoor bistro with my computer, writing stories still, and like never not writing stories.
As long as they are accompanied with the illustrations of Alex Ross.
Well, there's a lot of pressure there now. Thank you.
Okay. Now you mentioned that I've taken considerable amount of time of yours. You mentioned that you are always in discussion with Alex Ross for future projects. You cannot reveal the details of that, and we are not going to.
But Alex and I have a working relationship, and we're friends. We talk about what's going on in the comic industry all the time. When a new movie comes out, we talk about the movie. Was it good? Was it bad? What worked? What didn't work? I mean, we're friends in that sense, and we talk about stuff. And sometimes ideas just come about like, wouldn't it have been funnier or a better idea if this had happened in that? And then sometimes story ideas come out of that.
I and on behalf of the community here, we just have a very small request from both of you.
Yes.
We want to see both of you doing the work from A to Z, just like you did with Justice. Your storytelling and his art. And it needs to involve one of the most dramatic stories that one can ever think of, whether it's Justice League, Avengers, or X-Men, or even the Fantastic Four. It's just a request.
Yes.
So I'm really glad you were kind enough to listen to our request, and I hope it materializes. You have now been more exposed to the Saudi / GCC / Arab world creative industry. What would you like to say about that? As
I have just experienced I've experienced so much kindness that's probably the thing I've experienced most, like just kindness and understanding. And every note I experienced in the writing of things always made the project better. So I'm all for any opportunity to work with anyone who already sees how can we make the project as good as it can possibly be. So kindness, that's the thing I've experienced.
And what is your perception concerning the love that you have seen? Because you are mostly used to the dynamics that you come across in the North American market, but the passion and the zeal that you come across for comics and graphic novels in this part of the world, do you find it any different, or do you find it something similar? How do you see it?
Well, in some ways it's different in the sense that there are cultural differences, but people are people. And like, I feel like the closer you draw to anyone and the more you try to create with anyone, if they're the right, if the people I'm creating with are the right kind of people, great things happen.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Okay. How soon can we expect Jim Krueger to be here in Saudi Arabia? Because the reason I'm asking is that as we are recording this interview, Stan Lee's SuperCon is going to be taking place starting Thursday, 9th of June, in my hometown, Jeddah.
Oh, cool. Well, you know what? If someone there wants to bring me out for the con, I will happily come out for the con and meet people and sign and hang out and everything. I would happily do that. That would be fun.
Before I close this interview, I would like to leave you with your final thought, if you would like to share anything. And yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I guess my only other things is I have some other more obscure things that maybe people don't know about. So I always love sharing those things. And I think you can get them on Amazon or comic shops or whatever. My first comic, and there's about to be a big announcement coming on with that, is called The Foot Soldiers. And it is kind of dystopian. It's about this future that's kind of patrolled by tanks? Are they robots or are they people control? Anyhow, it's a story of three teenagers that go to the graveyard where all the superheroes are buried, and they rob the graves. That's how they get their powers. They fill the actual shoes of the original heroes, only to find out how hard it is to fill those shoes and actually be heroes.
That's a very rich plot, and it's still with Dark Horse.
No, it left Dark Horse a long time ago. There are announcements coming on it, but you can find a trade from Image, you can find a trade from AIT Planet Lair, you can still find individual issues, that kind of thing. I have another book about celebrity superheroes, not like the boys, more like the Fantastic Four or Booster Gold or like that. Celebrity superheroes who accidentally, while they're fighting bad guys, they accidentally kill an innocent bystander, and they're so afraid that this is going to mean they're going to lose their action figure line, they're going to lose their popularity, all that sort of thing, that they hide the body from the media, and they bury it secretly. Amazing. And then they wake up the next day and no one's ever heard of them before. So they've been cursed to always be forgotten. No matter what they do, people forget. So half the team becomes this team that says, oh, we can really change the world now, while the other half just wants their lives back. And so it becomes the conflict between these former teammates who now face the fact that no matter what they do, no one can really stop them except each other.
And this is going to be published under which imprint?
It's already published. It's called The No Ones. Okay. And it was with one publisher called Cave Pictures, but I don't know if it's going to stay with that publisher or what's going to happen with that publisher. And then, available on Amazon, I have a dark fairy tale called The High Cost of Happily Ever After, which is the heroic journey of the damsel in distress. We have all these fairy tales where she's in prison and he's fighting dragons to rescue her. In this case, she's in the dungeon of the enemy and he goes down in battle. And so she has to fight to escape on her own. And then finally, there's a book called The Runner, also available on Amazon, drawn by Zach Brunner. And that's the story about a guy who's been on the run from the Angel of Death since 1936. And he's not getting any older. He's figured out how to stay steps ahead of death. He's got all his rules figured out. And then he accidentally, he does it on purpose. He saves a girl who's about to be killed, because he knows that if death comes for that girl, death will know where he is again. So out of purely selfish motivation and self-preservation, he rescues her, but then that opens him up to human relationships again. And now they're both on the run from death.
Very interesting plots that you have shared. I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for letting me share.
No, it's the least we can do. It's the least we can do, because the amount of good that comes out of the hard work that you do for us readers, this is the least we can pay you back with.
Well, thank you so much. And again, I said it at the beginning, I so appreciate you telling these stories and making sure people know about these stories. And I so appreciate you, introducing people to my stories too, if they've never heard of them.
Well, sir, all in a day's work for Son of Jeddah. And this is something which I have to do, because, like I said, if I have good memories because of reading your work or because of reading some other creators' work, I just feel very burdened if I don't tell the world about it.
No, I love it. I love it so much. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you once again. And I hope to see you soon, especially all of us here in Saudi Arabia, and especially in our hometown, Jeddah.
That would be amazing. I would love that too.